The heart monitor flatlined at 11:47 p.m., and no one moved. Dr. Marcus Vell stood over the bed with his arms crossed, pen tapping against the clipboard like a judge's gavel. 6 months is enough, he said, not to the patient but to the man standing across from him, Admiral James Harrow, silver-haired, stone-faced, uniform pressed sharp enough to cut. Your daughter isn't coming back. It's time to let her go. Lena Cross stood near the door, hands clasped behind her back, saying nothing. She'd been a nurse at Ridgecrest Memorial for 3 months, long enough to know when to speak and when to stay invisible. Right now, she was furniture, a rookie, a body filling a shift. Dr. Vell didn't even look at her when he waved toward the machines. Disconnect her tomorrow morning. I'll have the paperwork ready. But Lena's eyes weren't on the doctor. They were on the girl in the bed, pale, motionless, oxygen mask fogging with each mechanical breath, and on the fingertips of her right hand, which were warm. Not cold, not stiff. Warm. Sir, Lena said quietly. One last check. Dr. Vell turned, eyebrows raised like she'd just interrupted a funeral. Excuse me? Just one more look, Lena said, before we call it. The room shifted, not in temperature, in weight. And when Lena placed 2 fingers along the girl's wrist and pressed, just slightly, just precisely, the monitor spiked. A single, impossible blip. Dr. Vell froze. The Admiral's jaw tightened, and Lena Cross, the nobody nurse they'd all ignored, became the only person in the room who mattered. If you want to see how this story ends, how one voice in the dark turned into a firestorm that shook an entire hospital, stay with me to the very end. Like this video, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. And let's see who really holds the power when the truth refuses to stay buried. The fluorescent lights in Ridgecrest Memorial's ICU hummed like a low growl, constant and cold. Lena had been on her feet for 9 hours, rotating between patients, checking vitals, answering call lights, staying out of the way. That was the job. Keep your head down. Don't ask questions. Don't make waves. She was good at it, better than most. She'd learned a long time ago that being right didn't matter if no one wanted to hear it. But tonight was different. Tonight, she was standing in room 12, where Admiral James Harrow's daughter had been lying in a coma for half a year. The girl's name was Sophie Harrow, 23 years old, former med student, car accident on a rainy highway outside the city. Severe head trauma. Induced coma. Then, nothing. No improvement. No decline. Just a flat line of existence that the hospital had labeled persistent vegetative state 3 months ago and brain dead 2 weeks after that. Dr. Marcus Vell, the attending neurologist, had made that call. He was a man who liked certainty, clean answers, tidy outcomes. He stood now at the foot of Sophie's bed, tablet in hand, scrolling through charts with the detached efficiency of someone reviewing a grocery list. Across from him, Admiral Harrow stood rigid, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on his daughter's face. He hadn't sat down once since he'd arrived. Admiral, Dr. Vell said, not looking up, I know this is difficult, but we've run every test, twice. There's no cortical activity, no responsiveness, no pain reflexes. Your daughter is gone. What's left is a biological process. Nothing more. The Admiral's voice came out flat, controlled. She's breathing. The machine is breathing, Dr. Vell corrected. Her brainstem is keeping her heart beating, yes, but there's no consciousness, no awareness. She doesn't know you're here. She doesn't know anything. Lena stood by the IV pole, adjusting the drip rate even though it didn't need adjusting. She wasn't supposed to be listening. She wasn't supposed to care. But her eyes kept drifting to Sophie's hand, resting on the blanket, fingers slightly curled. Warm. She'd checked it twice already. I've seen cases like this drag on for years, Dr. Vell continued, his tone softening just enough to sound sympathetic. It's not fair to her, or to you. At some point, we have to accept reality. Admiral Harrow's jaw worked, muscle twitching beneath the skin. What are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to let her rest. The room went silent except for the ventilator's rhythmic hiss. Lena glanced at the monitor above the bed. Flat green line, steady pulse, oxygen saturation at 98%. Everything normal. Everything dead. Dr. Vell set the tablet down. Tomorrow morning, we'll remove the ventilator. She won't suffer. It'll be peaceful. Peaceful, the Admiral repeated, voice hollow. Yes. Lena's hand tightened around the IV pole. She shouldn't say anything. She was a nurse. A new one. And this was a doctor's call. A family's call. Not hers. But her eyes went back to Sophie's hand and something in her chest tightened like a fist. Sir, she said. Dr. Vell's head snapped toward her. What? One last check, Lena said, keeping her voice even, before we make the final decision. Dr. Vell stared at her like she had just suggested checking for a pulse with a Ouija board. We've checked. Repeatedly. I know, but... Lena hesitated, then stepped closer to the bed. Just humor me. One more time. The Admiral's eyes shifted to her, sharp and assessing. Dr. Vell's mouth thinned into a line. Nurse Cross, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this isn't a teaching moment. We're not running drills. I understand, Lena said. But if we're about to end her life, what's 5 more minutes? The words hung in the air, heavy and blunt. Dr. Vell's face darkened. We're not ending her life. We're withdrawing futile care. Then let me check. Check what exactly? Lena didn't answer. She just reached down and placed 2 fingers along the inside of Sophie's wrist, just below the base of her thumb. Not checking the pulse, checking something else. She pressed gently, then slightly harder, feeling for the subtle resistance of muscle tone, the faint warmth of circulation. Then she shifted her fingers, applying pressure to a specific point along the radial nerve. The monitor spiked. Just once, a single blip on the EEG line that had been flat for months. Dr. Vell blinked. What was that? I don't know, Lena said, her heart hammering. But it wasn't nothing. It was a glitch. Maybe, or maybe it was a response. Dr. Vell stepped forward, eyes narrowing. You think you triggered a neural response with a pressure point? That's not how the brain works. Then explain the spike. I don't have to explain a machine error to you, Nurse Cross. His voice sharpened, clipped and cold. You're out of your depth. Step back. Lena didn't move. She pressed the point again, same spot, same pressure. The monitor flickered, another spike, slightly stronger this time. Admiral Harrow's eyes locked onto the screen. Do that again. Admiral, please, Dr. Vell started. Do it again, the Admiral repeated, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Lena pressed a 3rd time. This time, the spike was unmistakable. A sharp, jagged peak that lasted a full second before flattening out again. Dr. Vell stared at the monitor, then at Lena, then back at the monitor. That's a reflex. Peripheral nervous system. It doesn't mean she's conscious. But it means she's responding, Lena said. To stimuli, not to awareness. There's a difference. Is there? Admiral Harrow's voice was quiet, controlled, dangerous. Because 6 months ago, you told me she'd never respond to anything again. Dr. Vell's face went tight. I said she wouldn't regain consciousness. And she won't. A spinal reflex doesn't change that. Then why didn't it show up on any of your tests? Because we weren't testing for... Dr. Vell stopped, frustration flashing across his face. Admiral, I understand you want hope, but false hope is worse than no hope. This nurse is giving you the latter. Lena's jaw clenched, but she kept her mouth shut. Not the time, not the place. Admiral Harrow looked down at his daughter, then at Lena. What's your name? Lena Cross, sir. And what makes you think my daughter is still in there? Lena met his gaze. Because her body is fighting. It's subtle, but it's there. Her skin temperature, her muscle tone, the way her fingers curl when I adjust her hand, those aren't reflex actions. They're controlled actions. Small, unconscious maybe, but controlled. Dr. Vell let out a sharp breath. That's conjecture. You're a nurse, not a neurologist. I was a field medic, Lena said, her voice steady. Army, 3 tours. I've seen soldiers with traumatic brain injuries, blown pupils, no reflexes, flatlined EEGs, wake up weeks later because someone noticed a twitch, a blink, a squeeze. I know what a dying body looks like, and I know what a fighting one looks like. This one is fighting. The room went silent. Dr. Vell's face hardened. Your experience in a combat zone doesn't translate to a hospital setting, Nurse Cross. This is neurology, not battlefield triage. Then let's test it, Lena said. Bring in another neurologist. Run the scans again. If I'm wrong, you lose nothing. If I'm right... She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Admiral Harrow turned to Dr. Vell. Do it. Admiral, this is... Do it, the Admiral repeated, and this time his voice dropped into a register that made Dr. Vell's spine stiffen. You're asking me to kill my daughter. The least you can do is make sure she's actually dead first. Dr. Vell's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Lena, then at the monitor, then back at the Admiral. Fine, I'll schedule a secondary evaluation, but it's going to take time. We'll need to bring in a specialist, run new scans. How long? 2 days, maybe 3. You have 12 hours, Admiral Harrow said. And if you don't have someone here by then, I'll make a call. And when I make a call, people show up. Dr. Vell's jaw tightened, but he nodded. 12 hours. Fine. He turned and walked out, footsteps sharp against the linoleum. The door swung shut. The room settled back into the hum of machines and the quiet rasp of the ventilator. Admiral Harrow stood motionless for a long moment, staring down at his daughter. Then he looked at Lena. Thank you, he said. Lena shook her head. Don't thank me yet, sir. I could be wrong. But you don't think you are? No, she admitted. I don't. He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. Then we'll see. Lena left the room 20 minutes later, her hands still shaking. She walked down the hall, past the nurse's station, past the supply closet, and into the break room where she collapsed into a chair and pressed her palms against her eyes. What the hell had she just done? She'd challenged a doctor. In front of a patient's family, in front of an admiral. She'd overstepped, pushed back, forced a confrontation that could cost her her job. And for what? A hunch? A feeling? No, not a feeling. A fact. She'd seen it. The spike. The response. The warmth. Sophie Harrow wasn't brain dead. She was there. Somewhere. Trapped, maybe. Silent, definitely. But there. Lena exhaled slowly, dropped her hands, and stared at the ceiling. She'd been in situations like this before. Not in hospitals, in tents, in bunkers, in the back of medevac choppers where the only thing between a soldier and death was her ability to read a body faster than the monitors could. She'd learned to trust her instincts because the machines didn't always tell the truth. Sometimes the truth was in the details. The small things. The things everyone else ignored. The door swung open. Lena looked up. Dr. Vell stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face carved from stone. My office, he said. Now. Dr. Vell's office was small, neat, sterile. Diplomas on the wall. A photo of him shaking hands with someone important. A desk that looked like it had never seen clutter. He sat behind it, fingers steepled, and stared at Lena like she was a problem he hadn't figured out how to solve yet. Sit, he said. Lena sat. Dr. Vell leaned back in his chair, eyes cold. Do you know what you just did in there? I asked for a second opinion. You undermined me, in front of a patient's family. You made me look incompetent. That wasn't my intention. Then what was your intention, Nurse Cross? To play hero? To prove you're smarter than the attending physician? Lena's jaw tightened. To make sure we weren't about to kill someone who's still alive. Dr. Vell's eyes narrowed. Sophie Harrow is not alive, not in any meaningful sense. What you saw was a reflex, a nerve firing, nothing more. Then why did it only happen when I applied pressure to that specific point? Because you got lucky, or the machine glitched, or a dozen other explanations that don't involve her magically waking up. I'm not saying she's going to wake up. I'm saying she's not brain dead. Dr. Vell leaned forward, voice dropping. Listen to me very carefully. I have been practicing neurology for 20 years. I have diagnosed hundreds of cases like this. I know what brain death looks like. And Sophie Harrow is brain dead. The fact that you saw a single spike on a monitor doesn't change that. Then why are you so afraid of a second opinion? The words came out before Lena could stop them. Dr. Vell's face went still, color draining from his cheeks. Get out, he said quietly. Lena stood. I'm sorry if I... Out. Now. She left. The door clicked shut behind her, soft and final. The next 12 hours were the longest of Lena's life. She finished her shift, went home, tried to sleep, couldn't. She kept seeing Sophie's hand, the warmth, the curl of her fingers, the way the monitor had spiked just for a second, like a voice shouting through static. At 6 a.m., she got the call. Report to ICU, immediately. She threw on scrubs, grabbed her keys, and drove back to Ridgecrest Memorial. The parking lot was half empty, the skies still dark. She walked through the automatic doors, rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, and stepped into the ICU. The hallway was crowded. Nurses, administrators, 2 security guards, and standing outside room 12, arms crossed, face carved from granite, was Admiral Harrow. Lena approached slowly. Sir? He turned. The neurologist is here. Military. I called in a favor. Already? I told you when I make a call, people show up. The door to room 12 opened. A woman stepped out, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, wearing a white coat with a name tag that read, Dr. Elena Moss, neurologist, Walter Reed Medical Center. She held a tablet, and her expression was unreadable. Admiral, she said, we need to talk. Admiral Harrow's voice was steady. What did you find? Dr. Moss glanced at Lena, then back at the Admiral. Your daughter isn't brain dead. The hallway went silent. Dr. Vell, standing near the nurse's station, went pale. That's impossible. We ran the tests. You ran some tests, Dr. Moss said, her voice cool and clinical. But not the right ones. And based on what I'm seeing, you missed something critical. What are you talking about? Dr. Moss turned the tablet toward him. Brainstem compression. Minimal, but present. It's interfering with the reticular activating system, the part of the brain responsible for wakefulness. That's why she's unresponsive. Not because she's brain dead, because she's locked in. The words hit like a bomb. Dr. Vell stared at the screen, mouth opening and closing. That's not possible. We would have seen that. You would have, Dr. Moss agreed, if you'd ordered a high-resolution MRI instead of relying on outdated scans. We did order an MRI 6 months ago, and not with the protocol I just used. Dr. Moss's eyes hardened. She's been conscious this entire time, Dr. Vell. Aware, listening, unable to move, unable to speak, trapped inside her own body while you convinced her father to pull the plug. The hallway erupted, voices overlapping, sharp and panicked. Dr. Vell backed up, shaking his head. No, that's not, this isn't. Admiral Harrow stepped forward and the room went quiet. His voice was low, controlled, lethal. You were going to kill my daughter. Dr. Vell's face went white. I didn't know You didn't check. I did everything by protocol. Then your protocol is broken, the Admiral said. And so is this hospital. Dr. Moss looked at Lena. You're the nurse who flagged this? Lena nodded. How did you know? I didn't. Not for sure, but I saw the signs, small things, temperature, muscle tone, a response that didn't fit the diagnosis. She paused. I've seen it before, in the field. Dr. Moss's expression softened, just slightly. Good eye. She turned to Admiral Harrow. We need to move her, immediately. I have a facility that specializes in locked-in syndrome. If we act fast, we can start treatment, maybe even reverse some of the compression. Do it, the Admiral said. Dr. Vell opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Lena, then at the Admiral, then at Dr. Moss. And then, without a word, he turned and walked away. Lena watched him go, her heart pounding. The hallway was still buzzing, administrators on phones, nurses whispering, security hovering near the edges. But in the center of it all, standing calm and immovable, was Admiral Harrow. He looked at Lena. You saved her life. Lena shook her head. Not yet, but maybe we will. The Admiral's jaw tightened, and for the first time, something like emotion flickered across his face. Thank you, Nurse Cross. Lena nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. Dr. Moss gestured toward room 12. I'm going to start prep for transport. Admiral, if you'd like to sit with her, I would. They walked into the room together. Lena stayed in the hallway, watching through the window as the Admiral sat down beside his daughter and took her hand. And then, so faint it was almost invisible, Sophie's fingers moved. Just a fraction. Just enough. A squeeze. Lena's breath caught. She stepped closer to the glass, eyes wide. The Admiral saw it too. He leaned forward, voice cracking. "Sophie, can you hear me?" Another squeeze, stronger this time. "Doctor." Moss grabbed the tablet, scanning the monitor. "Neural activity spiking. She's responding. She looked up, eyes bright. "She's awake." The hallway exploded into chaos. Voices, movement, phones ringing, but Lena didn't hear any of it. She just stood there, staring through the window, watching as Sophie Harrow's eyelids fluttered. Once, twice, and then they opened. Her eyes found her father's face, and something inside her, some last desperate thread of awareness, held on. The Admiral's voice broke. "I'm here, Sophie. I'm here." Her lips moved, barely. No sound. But the shape was unmistakable. Dad. The room erupted. Nurses rushing in. Dr. Moss barking orders. Equipment beeping. Alarms ringing. But through it all, the Admiral stayed beside his daughter, hand gripping hers, refusing to let go. Lena turned away, her vision blurring. She walked down the hall, past the chaos, past the stairs, and into the break room. She sat down, hands shaking, and pressed her palms against her face. She'd been right. Against every protocol, every hierarchy, every voice telling her to stay quiet. She'd been right. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. Because now someone had to answer for what almost happened. And Lena had a feeling that reckoning was going to be loud. The silence in the break room lasted maybe 30 seconds before the door slammed open and Caroline Reeves stormed in, her heels clicking like gunshots against the tile. She was the hospital administrator, mid-50s, tailored suit, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her face was the color of raw meat. "What the hell did you just do?" she hissed. Lena looked up, still dazed, hands still trembling. "I did my job." "Your job is to follow orders, not to stage a medical coup in front of a patient's family." "I asked for a second opinion. That's not a coup." "You humiliated Dr. Vell. You bypassed protocol. You brought in an outside specialist without authorization." Caroline's voice dropped, sharp and cold. "Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused?" Lena stood slowly, meeting her gaze. "A woman almost died because of a misdiagnosis. I'd say the damage was already done." Caroline's jaw tightened. Sophie Harrow was brain dead. Multiple tests confirmed it. Except she wasn't, and now she's awake. So maybe those tests were wrong. Or maybe Dr. Moss is wrong. Or maybe this is a temporary fluke that's going to collapse in the next 12 hours. And then what? We'll have given the family false hope. We'll have second-guessed our own medical staff. We'll have saved a life, Lena interrupted. That's what we'll have done. Caroline stared at her, eyes cold and calculating. "You've been here 3 months, Nurse Cross." 3. "Do you really think you know better than a neurologist with 20 years of experience?" "I think I know what I saw." "What you think you saw." Caroline stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "This hospital has protocols, standards, a reputation to protect. You just threw all of that into chaos because you had a hunch." Lena's hands curled into fists at her sides. "It wasn't a hunch. It was a response. Measurable. Documented. Doctor." Moss confirmed it. "Dr. Moss is military. She doesn't answer to this hospital. She doesn't understand how things work here." "Maybe that's the problem." The words hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. Caroline's face went rigid. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Caroline straightened, smoothing her jacket with deliberate precision. "You're suspended, effective immediately, pending a full review of your conduct." Lena's stomach dropped. "You can't." "I absolutely can. You violated protocol. You disrespected a senior physician. You caused a disruption that's going to cost this hospital time, money, and credibility." Caroline's smile was thin and humorless. "Go home, Nurse Cross. We'll call you when we've decided what to do with you." Lena opened her mouth, then closed it. There was no point. Caroline had already made up her mind. This wasn't about Sophie. It wasn't about the diagnosis. It was about control, about making sure no one questioned the system. She grabbed her bag and walked out, past the nurse's station, past the stairs, past the whispers. She didn't look back. The parking lot was cold and empty, the sky just starting to lighten at the edges. Lena sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, she pulled it out. 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails, all from the same number, unlisted. She hit play. "Nurse Cross, this is Dr. Elena Moss. I need to speak with you. Call me back as soon as you get this." Lena stared at the phone, then dialed. "Doctor." Moss picked up on the first ring. "Where are you?" "Parking lot. Just got suspended." There was a pause. "Of course you did." "What do you mean?" "I mean hospitals don't like being wrong, especially publicly. And you just made them very, very wrong." Dr. Moss's voice was brisk, no nonsense. "Listen, I'm transferring Sophie to Walter Reed within the hour. The Admiral wants you there." Lena blinked. "Why?" "Because you're the one who caught it. And because he trusts you." A beat. "Do you have a passport?" "Yes, but..." "Good. I'll send a car. Be ready in 20 minutes." The line went dead. Lena sat there, phone still pressed to her ear, mind racing. This was insane. She'd just been suspended. She couldn't just leave. She had bills, responsibilities, a life that didn't involve military neurologists and cross-country medical transfers. But she'd also just saved a woman's life. And if the hospital was going to punish her for it, then maybe the hospital wasn't where she belonged. She started the car and drove home. None. The black SUV showed up exactly 20 minutes later. No markings. Tinted windows. A driver in a dark suit who didn't say a word when Lena climbed into the back seat. They drove in silence through the city, past the warehouses, past the river, and onto a private airstrip where a small jet sat waiting, engines already humming. Dr. Moss was standing at the base of the stairs, tablet in hand. She looked up as Lena approached. "You came." "Apparently." "Good. We don't have much time." She gestured toward the plane. "Sophie's stable, but we need to get her into surgery within the next 6 hours. The compression is minimal, but it's been there for months. The longer we wait, the more damage it could cause." Lena followed her up the stairs and into the cabin. It was small, utilitarian, nothing fancy, just rows of seats, medical equipment strapped to the walls, and a gurney in the center where Sophie lay, still intubated, still pale, but unmistakably present. Her eyes were closed, but her chest rose and fell with the ventilator's rhythm, and her fingers twitched slightly when the plane's engines roared to life. Admiral Harrow sat beside her, one hand resting on hers, his face carved from stone. He looked up when Lena entered, and something in his expression softened. "Nurse Cross." "Sir?" "Thank you for coming." Lena nodded, unsure what to say. She took a seat across from him, buckling in as the plane began to taxi. "Doctor." Moss sat beside her, already pulling up scans on her tablet. "Walk me through it," Dr. Moss said without preamble. "What made you check that pressure point?" Lena exhaled, collecting her thoughts. "I've seen locked-in syndrome before. Twice. Both times in soldiers with severe TBIs. The symptoms are subtle. Most people miss them. But there's a pattern. Inconsistent muscle tone. Warmth in the extremities when there shouldn't be. Micro-movements that look like reflexes but aren't random." "Whoa," she paused. Sophie's fingers were warm. Her hand had tension. And when I applied pressure to the radial nerve, I got a response. That's not a reflex. That's a signal. Dr. Moss studied her for a long moment. "You're wasted as a floor nurse." Lena huffed a bitter laugh. "Tell that to my former employer." "I already did. Called the hospital director myself. Told him if he fires you, I'll make sure every military medical facility in the country knows Ridgecrest Memorial misdiagnosed a locked-in patient and nearly killed her." Dr. Moss's smile was sharp. "He wasn't happy." "I'm sure he wasn't. But he also can't afford the scandal, so congratulations, you're unfired." Lena blinked. "What?" "Suspension lifted, effective immediately. You'll get a formal apology, probably a raise, maybe even a commendation." Dr. Moss shrugged. "Or you could tell them to shove it and come work for me." Lena stared at her. "You're serious? Do I look like I joke?" She didn't. Lena glanced at Admiral Harrow, who was watching the exchange with a faint, grim smile. "Think about it," Dr. Moss said. "We land in 4 hours. You've got until then." The flight was smooth, quiet, except for the hum of the engines and the steady beep of Sophie's monitors. Lena spent most of it staring out the window, watching the clouds drift past, trying to process the last 12 hours. She'd gone from a nobody nurse to the center of a medical firestorm. She'd been praised, suspended, unsuspended, and offered a job, all before breakfast. And through it all, the only thing that mattered was the woman on the gurney, breathing, alive, fighting her way back from a darkness no one else had believed she could escape. Halfway through the flight, Sophie's eyes opened. Just a sliver, just enough. Admiral Harrow leaned forward immediately. "Sophie? Can you hear me?" Her gaze drifted, unfocused, searching. Then it landed on him and held. Dr. Moss was at her side in seconds, checking the monitors, adjusting the ventilator. "Sophie, I'm Dr. Moss. You're safe. You're on a plane. We're taking you to a hospital where we can help you. Do you understand?" Sophie's eyes flicked toward her, then back to her father. Her lips moved, barely. No sound. The tube prevented that, but the shape was clear. "Where?" "Washington," the Admiral said, voice rough. "Walter Reed, best doctors in the country. You're going to be okay." Her eyes closed again, exhausted, but her fingers tightened around his. Just slightly. Just enough. Lena watched from her seat, throat tight. She'd seen a lot of things in her life. Soldiers brought back from the edge, miracles pulled from wreckage, lives saved by sheer stubbornness and luck. But this felt different. This felt like something that shouldn't have been possible, like the universe had bent just enough to let one person slip through. Dr. Moss sat back down beside her, exhaling slowly. "She's strong." "Yeah," Lena said quietly. "She is. But she's not out of the woods yet. The surgery is risky. If we can't relieve the pressure without causing additional trauma, she could lose motor function. Speech, cognitive ability." Dr. Moss's voice was clinical, detached. "Best case, she makes a full recovery. Worst case, she's paralyzed from the neck down for the rest of her life." Lena's chest tightened. "And the odds?" 50-50. Maybe less. "Does she know?" "Not yet, but she will." "Doctor." Moss glanced at the Admiral, who was still holding his daughter's hand, oblivious to their conversation. "He's prepared for it. Or he thinks he is. But you never really are." Lena nodded. She knew that truth too well. They landed at Joint Base Andrews just after noon. A medical team was waiting on the tarmac. 2 nurses, a paramedic, and a trauma surgeon who introduced himself as Dr. Keller, tall and broad-shouldered with graying hair and hands that looked like they could crack walnuts. He took one look at Sophie and started barking orders. "Get her on the stretcher. Oxygen at 100%. I want a fresh IV line and a new neuro workup the second we're inside. Move." The team moved like a machine, efficient and silent. Sophie was transferred, strapped in, rolled toward the waiting ambulance. Admiral Harrow walked beside her, never letting go of her hand. Lena and Dr. Moss followed. "You coming to the hospital?" Dr. Moss asked. Lena hesitated. "I don't know. I'm not. This isn't my case." "It is now." Dr. Moss glanced at her. "You started this. You don't get to walk away before it's finished." Lena's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Okay." They climbed into the ambulance. The doors slammed shut. The siren wailed, and they were moving again, racing through the streets of Washington toward Walter Reed, where the real fight was about to begin. The hospital was massive, sprawling, sterile, gleaming with the kind of precision that only military institutions could achieve. They wheeled Sophie through the emergency entrance, past security, past waiting rooms, and straight into the neurology wing, where a surgical team was already prepping. Dr. Keller moved like a general, commanding the room with clipped efficiency. "I need a full MRI, CT, and PET scan. I want blood work, coagulation panel, and a consult with anesthesiology. We operate in 3 hours." Admiral Harrow stood in the hallway watching through the window as they worked. Lena stood beside him, hands clasped behind her back, saying nothing. "She's going to make it," the Admiral said quietly. Not a question, a statement. Lena didn't answer. She didn't know if Sophie would make it. No one did, but she understood why he needed to believe it. Dr. Moss appeared beside them, holding a tablet. "Scans are back." The compression is worse than I thought. It's not just the brainstem, there's swelling in the cervical spine. If we don't decompress soon, she could lose respiratory function. The Admiral's face went still. How soon? Hours. Maybe less. Then operate now. We need to operate now. Dr. Moss looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. I'll tell Keller. She disappeared into the surgical suite. The Admiral stayed at the window, unmoving, silent. Lena stood beside him, matching his stillness, offering the only thing she could. Presence. Minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. Finally, the doors opened. Dr. Keller stepped out, still in scrubs, mask pulled down, face unreadable. Admiral Harrow turned. Well? Dr. Keller's mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. She's stable. We relieved the pressure. No major complications. She's in recovery now. The Admiral's shoulders sagged, just slightly. And her prognosis? Too early to say, but she's breathing on her own. That's a good sign. Dr. Keller glanced at Lena. You're the nurse who caught this? Lena nodded. Good work. He turned back to the Admiral. You can see her in an hour, maybe 2. He walked away, leaving them in the hallway, surrounded by the hum of machines and the distant echo of footsteps. Admiral Harrow looked at Lena. I owe you my daughter's life. Lena shook her head. You don't owe me anything, sir. I just did what anyone should have done. But they didn't. You did. His voice was quiet, steady, and I won't forget that. Sophie woke up 6 hours later. Lena wasn't there. She'd gone to find coffee, to sit in the cafeteria and stare at the wall and try to process the fact that this was real, that she'd actually pulled this off, that a woman was alive because she'd refused to stay quiet. But when she came back, the hallway was crowded. Nurses, doctors, Dr. Moss. And standing outside the recovery room, face pale and tear-streaked, was Admiral Harrow. Lena stopped. Sir? He looked at her, and his expression was something she'd never seen before. Raw, unguarded, human. She spoke. Lena's breath caught. What? She said my name. His voice cracked. She looked at me, and she said, Dad. Lena's vision blurred. She blinked hard, swallowing the tightness in her throat. That's incredible. It's because of you. No, it's because of her. She fought. She held on. Because you gave her the chance. He stepped forward, voice steady again. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if she'll fully recover, but she's alive. And that's more than I thought I'd have this morning. Lena nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Moss appeared in the doorway, smiling faintly. She's asking for you. Lena blinked. Me? You, by name. She walked into the room. Sophie was sitting up slightly, still pale, still weak, but her eyes were open and clear. She looked at Lena, and her lips curved into a faint, exhausted smile. Hi, Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. Hi, Lena said, stepping closer. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. A pause. But alive. Lena laughed, the sound shaky and unexpected. Yeah, you are. Sophie's hand reached out, trembling. Lena took it. Thank you, Sophie said. Lena shook her head. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Sophie's grip tightened, just slightly. I heard everything, the whole time. I was there, just couldn't move, couldn't speak. Couldn't do anything except listen. Her voice broke. And I heard them say they were going to let me die. Lena's chest ached. I'm sorry. Don't be. You stopped them. Sophie's eyes were bright, fierce. You didn't give up, even when they told you to. Lena didn't know what to say, so she just held Sophie's hand and let the silence fill the space between them. The next 2 days were a blur. Tests, scans, physical therapy assessments. Sophie's recovery was slow but steady. She could move her fingers, her toes, could form words even if they came out slurred and soft. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Dr. Moss was downright triumphant. But back at Ridgecrest Memorial, something else was happening. Dr. Vell had disappeared. Not literally, but he'd stopped showing up to rounds, stopped answering calls. His office was empty. Rumor had it he'd taken a sudden leave of absence. No explanation, no timeline. Lena heard about it from a text, a former coworker, brief and blunt. Vel's gone. Admin's freaking out. Lawyers everywhere. What the hell did you do? She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Because 3 days after Sophie woke up, Admiral Harrow made a call. And when Admiral James Harrow made a call, people listened. He contacted the state medical board. He contacted the Joint Commission. He contacted a senator he'd served with who happened to chair the Committee on Healthcare Oversight. And within 72 hours, Ridgecrest Memorial was under investigation. Lena found out when Dr. Moss called her, voice clipped and satisfied. You're going to want to see this. She pulled up the news on her phone. The headline hit like a punch. Military daughter misdiagnosed as brain dead. Hospital under federal review. The article was detailed, damning. It outlined Sophie's case, the misdiagnosis, the pressure to withdraw care. It quoted Dr. Moss. It quoted Admiral Harrow. And buried in the 5th paragraph, it mentioned a nurse, unnamed, who had flagged the error and potentially saved a life. Lena's hands shook as she read. The next day, a second article dropped. This one named Dr. Vel. It detailed his history, previous complaints, overruled diagnoses, a pattern of arrogance that had been quietly swept under the rug for years. It mentioned falsified timestamps on Sophie's charts, manipulated test results, a cover-up that had nearly turned into manslaughter. By the end of the week, 3 administrators had resigned. Dr. Vel's medical license was suspended pending review. And Ridgecrest Memorial was facing lawsuits from 6 other families whose loved ones had been under Vel's care. Lena watched it all unfold from a distance, half numb, half vindicated. She'd wanted justice. She'd gotten an avalanche. Quote. 2 weeks later, she was back in Washington. Not at Walter Reed, at a small office building near the Pentagon, where Dr. Moss had set up a meeting. I meant what I said on the plane, Dr. Moss said, leaning back in her chair. I want you on my team. Lena crossed her arms. Doing what? Consulting, training, field assessments for complex neuro cases. You've got instincts most doctors don't. I can teach you the rest. I'm not a doctor. You don't need to be. You need to be what you already are. Someone who sees what others miss. Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, What happened to Dr. Vel? Dr. Moss's smile was sharp. He's finished, license revoked, criminal investigation pending. He'll never practice medicine again. And the hospital? Settlement talks. They'll pay out quietly, and they'll implement new protocols. Also quietly. She leaned forward. But the real story, that's still coming. Lena frowned. What do you mean? Dr. Moss pulled out a file, slid it across the desk. Sophie's not the only one. I've been digging. 5 other patients under Vel's care in the last 3 years, all diagnosed as brain dead or vegetative. All had families pressured to withdraw support. 3 of them died. Lena's stomach turned. You think? I think Dr. Vel was covering up mistakes, and I think Ridgecrest Memorial knew. Dr. Moss's eyes were cold, hard. But I can't prove it. Not yet. Lena stared at the file, her mind racing. What do you need? Someone who can go back in. Someone they won't suspect. Someone who can get access to the records before they're scrubbed. Lena looked up sharply. You want me to go back to Ridgecrest? I want you to finish what you started. The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Lena's heart pounded. This was bigger than Sophie. Bigger than one misdiagnosis. This was systemic, deliberate. And if Dr. Moss was right, people had died because of it. She met Dr. Moss's gaze. When do I start? Dr. Moss smiled. Tomorrow. Lena walked out of the building into the cold Washington evening, her mind spinning. She pulled out her phone, hesitated, then dialed. Admiral Harrow answered on the second ring. Nurse Cross? Sir, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. If I go back to Ridgecrest, if I dig into this, there's a chance it gets ugly. Legal, public. Are you prepared for that? There was a long pause. Then the Admiral's voice came through, low and steady. My daughter is alive because you didn't back down. If there are others who weren't as lucky, then they deserve the same fight. A beat. Do what you need to do. I'll back you. Lena exhaled slowly. Thank you, sir. She hung up, stood there in the dark, breath fogging in the cold air. Then she turned and walked toward the metro station, her mind already running through the plan. Tomorrow, she'd go back to Ridgecrest. Back to the place that had tried to silence her. And this time, she wouldn't just save one life. She'd burn the whole system down. But as she descended the stairs into the station, her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. Stay out of this. You've done enough. Walk away or you'll regret it. Lena stopped, staring at the screen. Her pulse quickened. She looked around. The platform was empty, the tunnel dark. She deleted the text, kept walking. Because whoever sent it had just made a very big mistake. They'd shown her she was getting close. Lena showed the text to Dr. Moss the next morning. They were sitting in a cramped coffee shop 2 blocks from the Pentagon, the kind of place where nobody looked twice at hushed conversations and encrypted laptops. Dr. Moss read it once, then again, her expression flat. Burner number? Has to be. Did you respond? No. Good. Dr. Moss handed the phone back. Someone's nervous. That means we're on to something. Lena wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, the heat biting into her palms. Or it means someone's watching me. Probably both. Dr. Moss leaned back, arms crossed. The question is who? Hospital administration? Legal team? Or someone higher up the chain? Does it matter? It does if they escalate. Dr. Moss's eyes were sharp, calculating. Threats mean leverage. They think you'll back off. But if you don't, they'll either give up or get desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. Lena's jaw tightened. So, what's the play? You go back to Ridgecrest. Act normal. Don't ask questions, don't dig, just observe. Dr. Moss pulled a small thumb drive from her jacket pocket and slid it across the table. This has software that'll clone any file you access on their system. Plug it into a terminal, run the install, and it'll background sync to a secure server. They won't know you're copying anything. Lena picked up the drive, turned it over in her fingers. And if I get caught? You won't, as long as you're careful. That's not an answer, Doctor. Moss's smile was thin. Then don't get caught. Lena pocketed the drive. When do I start? Today. You've been officially reinstated. Caroline Reeves called this morning. Apparently the board decided your suspension was premature and unwarranted. You're back on the schedule starting tonight. Lena's stomach twisted. They're letting me back in. They don't have a choice. The optics are terrible. Military hero's daughter saved by vigilant nurse? They can't fire you without looking like monsters. Dr. Moss's expression darkened. But they'll be watching. Every move. Every conversation. You slip once, they'll bury you. Noted. And Lena? Dr. Moss's voice dropped, serious. If this gets too hot, you pull out. No heroics, no martyrdom. You get the files, and you get out. Understood? Lena nodded, but the knot in her chest told her it wouldn't be that simple. Ridgecrest Memorial looked exactly the same. Same fluorescent lights, same antiseptic smell, same tired nurses shuffling between rooms. But the atmosphere had changed. People looked at Lena differently now, some with respect, some with suspicion, some with barely concealed resentment. She clocked in at the nurse's station, pulled up her assignments, and kept her head down. 4 patients. All stable. Nothing complicated. The kind of shift designed to keep her busy and out of trouble. But 30 minutes into her rounds, Caroline Reeves appeared in the hallway, heels clicking, face a mask of forced professionalism. Nurse Cross, a word. Lena followed her into a small conference room. Caroline closed the door, didn't sit. I want to be very clear about something, Caroline said, voice clipped. You're back because the board decided it was in the hospital's best interest. Not because I agree with that decision. Understood. You will follow protocol. You will defer to attending physicians. You will not, under any circumstances, overstep your authority again. Is that clear? Crystal. Caroline's eyes narrowed. I don't trust you, Nurse Cross. You caused a media nightmare. You made this hospital look incompetent, and now we're under federal investigation because of you. Lena met her gaze, unflinching. No. You're under investigation because someone misdiagnosed a patient and tried to cover it up. I just pointed it out. Caroline's jaw tightened. Watch yourself. She left. The door swung shut with a soft click. Lena stood there for a moment, pulse hammering, then walked back into the hall. Two nurses were whispering near the supply closet. They stopped when they saw her, eyes darting away. A resident she didn't recognize gave her a wide berth. Even the janitor looked nervous. She was radioactive, and everyone knew it. The shift dragged. Lana checked vitals, distributed meds, updated charts. Routine, mechanical. But her mind was elsewhere, scanning for opportunities, angles, weak points. The records room was on the second floor, restricted access, keycard entry only. The digital system was hospital-wide, but certain files required admin credentials to view. She'd need a terminal, preferably one in a low-traffic area. At 2 a.m., during her break, she made her move. The staff lounge on the third floor was empty. The computer terminal in the corner unlocked. Someone had logged in and walked away, probably to grab food. Sloppy. Dangerous. Perfect. Lena slipped the thumb drive into the USB port, opened the program, and let it run. A progress bar appeared. 15 seconds, then 30, then done. The drive ejected itself. She pocketed it, closed the window, and walked out. No alarms, no alerts, just silence. She exhaled slowly, adrenaline buzzing under her skin. Step 1, complete. The next 3 days followed the same pattern. Work. Observe. Copy files when she could. She pulled patient records, administrative memos, interdepartmental emails, anything that mentioned Dr. Vell, anything that mentioned the patients Dr. Moss had flagged. The data painted a picture, a damning one. 5 patients, all diagnosed as brain dead or vegetative within a 6-month window. All under Dr. Vell's direct care. All had families who were aggressively counseled to withdraw support. 3 had died within 48 hours of disconnection. The other 2 had been transferred to other facilities, where they'd later been reevaluated and upgraded to minimally conscious. But the timestamps didn't line up. Test results had been altered, dates changed, signatures forged. Notes had been deleted, then re-entered with different conclusions. Someone had been systematically manipulating records, and it wasn't just Dr. Vell, it was institutional. Lena sent the files to Dr. Moss in encrypted batches. No calls, no texts, just silent data drops that disappeared into the server like smoke. But on the 4th night, things shifted. She was logging out of a terminal in the records room when the door opened. She turned, heart jumping. It was Dr. Raymond Cross. No relation, just an unfortunate coincidence, the hospital's chief of staff. Mid-60s, silver hair, expensive suit. He looked at her, then at the computer, then back at her. Working late, Nurse Cross? Just finishing up some charting. At 3 in the morning? I'm thorough. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm sure you are. He stepped closer, hands in his pockets. You know, I've been hearing some interesting things about you. Lena kept her face neutral. Oh? People say you're asking questions, poking around in files that don't concern you. I'm doing my job. Are you? He tilted his head, studying her. Because it seems like you're doing someone else's job. An investigator's, maybe. Lena's pulse quickened, but she didn't blink. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Dr. Cross leaned against the desk, casual, relaxed. Let me be blunt, Nurse Cross. This hospital is already under enough scrutiny. We don't need a rogue employee making things worse. I'm not rogue, I'm reinstated. For now. His voice dropped, quiet and dangerous. But that can change, very quickly. One complaint, one mistake, one hint of misconduct, and you're gone. Permanently. Lena held his gaze. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. He straightened, brushed imaginary dust off his sleeve. You're smart. You're capable. Don't throw that away chasing ghosts. He walked out, leaving the door open behind him. Lena stood there, heart pounding, hands trembling. She waited until his footsteps faded, then grabbed her bag and left. She didn't look back. She called Dr. Moss from her car, voice tight. They know. How much? Enough to warn me off. Dr. Cross, chief of staff, cornered me in the records room. Didn't accuse me outright, but he knows I'm digging. Dr. Moss swore softly. Did he see what you were accessing? No, I'd already logged out. Good. Then he's fishing. He suspects, but he can't prove anything. A pause. You need to pull back just for a few days. Let things cool down. I'm close. I can feel it. Close to what? Getting fired? Getting sued? Getting worse? Dr. Moss's voice hardened. I told you, if it gets too hot, you walk away. Lena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. 3 people are dead because someone covered up mistakes. If I walk away now, then you live to fight another day. But if you push too hard, you'll get buried alongside them. Lena didn't answer. She knew Dr. Moss was right, but something in her gut told her she was running out of time. That if she didn't move now, the evidence would disappear. The witnesses would go silent. The truth would get sealed in a settlement agreement and buried forever. I'll be careful, she said finally. That's not what I asked. It's the best I can offer, Dr. Moss sighed. Fine, but keep your head down. And if anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. Understood. She hung up. Sat there in the dark parking lot, engine idling, staring at the hospital's lit windows. Somewhere inside, people were dying, or being saved, or being abandoned, and the difference between those outcomes came down to who was paying attention. She wasn't going to stop paying attention. Well, the next night, Lena came in early. She'd requested a shift change, swapping to the neurology wing, where most of Dr. Vell's former patients had been housed. The nurse manager had approved it without question, probably thought it was safer to keep her contained in one area. Big mistake. The wing was quiet, understaffed, half the rooms empty. Budget cuts, someone said. Reallocation of resources. But Lena knew better. This was damage control. Move the patients, spread them out, make the pattern harder to see. She moved through the hall, checking rooms, reading charts. Most of the patients were stable. A few were critical. One room, 318, was locked. A red restricted access sign on the door. Lena frowned. She pulled up the chart on her tablet. The patient's name was listed as John Doe, age unknown, admitted 6 months ago with severe head trauma. Diagnosis: persistent vegetative state. No family listed, no visitors, no updates in over 3 months. Her stomach turned. She swiped her keycard. The lock beeped red. Access denied. She tried again. Same result. Looking for something? Lena spun. A security guard stood behind her, arms crossed, expression unreadable. I'm assigned to this wing, she said. I need to check on the patient in 318. That room's off limits. Why? Above my pay grade. You'll have to talk to administration. Lena stared at him, then at the door. Is there someone in there? Can't say. Can or won't. The guard's jaw tightened. Move along, Nurse Cross. She didn't move. What's in that room? I said move along. For a moment they stood there, locked in a silent standoff. Then Lena stepped back, nodded once, and walked away. But her mind was racing. A locked room. No chart access. No family. A patient labeled as John Doe who'd been in the hospital for 6 months without a single visitor. That wasn't protocol. That was a cover-up. She went to the break room, pulled out her phone, and texted Dr. Moss. Found something. Room 318, locked. Patient listed as John Doe. No access. The reply came back within seconds. Do not investigate alone. I'm sending someone. Lena stared at the message, then pocketed her phone. She couldn't wait for backup. If that room was locked, it meant someone didn't want it opened. And if someone didn't want it opened, it meant there was something inside worth hiding. She finished her shift, clocked out, and went home. But she didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, cross-referencing patient admissions with hospital records. John Doe had been admitted the same week as Sophie Harrow. Same diagnosis, same attending physician. Dr. Marcus Vell. Lena's hands went cold. She pulled up the rest of the file, what little she could access. No imaging, no test results, no treatment plan. Just a single note, dated 6 months ago. Patient unresponsive. Family declined further intervention. DNR in place. Comfort care only. But there was no family listed. No next of kin. No one to sign a DNR. Lena closed the laptop, her heart hammering. This wasn't just malpractice. This was something worse. The next morning, she didn't go to the hospital. She went to the county clerk's office and pulled public records, death certificates, missing person reports, unclaimed remains. It took 4 hours, but she found it. A man named Daniel Frost, age 32, reported missing 7 months ago. Last seen leaving a bar in downtown Ridgecrest. No body ever found. Case went cold. But his description matched the physical stats listed for John Doe. Height, weight, build. Lena took a photo of the record, sent it to Dr. Moss, and drove straight back to Ridgecrest Memorial. This time, she wasn't sneaking. She walked straight to Caroline Reeves's office, knocked once, and pushed the door open. Caroline looked up, startled. "Nurse Cross, you can't just—" "Room 318, Lena said. "Who's the patient?" Caroline's face went carefully blank. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You do. Locked room, restricted access. Patient listed as John Doe. I want to know who he is." "That's confidential. He's been here for 6 months with no family, no visitors, and no treatment plan. That's not confidential. That's illegal." Caroline stood, voice sharp. "You need to leave, now." "Is it Daniel Frost?" The name hit like a grenade. Caroline froze, color draining from her face. Lena stepped closer. "I know what happened. Dr. Vell misdiagnosed him, labeled him brain dead. And instead of admitting the mistake, you locked him in a room and erased his identity. That's absurd." "Then prove me wrong. Open the room. Let me see him." Caroline's mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, she looked genuinely rattled. Then her expression hardened, cold and sharp. "You're done here, Nurse Cross. Security will escort you out." "I'm not leaving." "Yes, you are." Caroline picked up the phone, dialed. "Security, I need an escort to my office, immediately." Lena didn't wait. She turned and walked out, straight toward the neurology wing, ignoring the shouts behind her. She could hear footsteps, security, probably Caroline, maybe others. She didn't care. She reached room 318, swiped her keycard. Still locked. She pounded on the door. "Open it!" A hand grabbed her arm. She spun, came face to face with the same guard from before. "You need to leave," he said. "Not until I see what's in that room." "Ma'am, I will remove you by force if I have to." Lena wrenched her arm free. "Then do it." "But I'm not moving." The guard hesitated. Behind him, Caroline appeared, flanked by 2 more security officers. Her face was white with fury. "Get her out of here," Caroline snapped. The guard reached for Lena again. And then, from behind the locked door, came a sound. A low, guttural moan. Everyone froze. Lena's heart stopped. She turned, stared at the door. "Did you hear that?" "It's nothing," Caroline said quickly. "Just—" The moan came again. Louder this time, desperate. Lena looked at the guard. "Open. The door." He glanced at Caroline. She shook her head. And then a voice, loud, commanding, unmistakable, cut through the hallway. "Open it." Everyone turned. Admiral James Harrow stood at the end of the hall, flanked by Dr. Moss and 2 military police officers in full uniform. Caroline's face went ashen. "Admiral, this is a private facility. You have no authority." "I have a federal warrant," Admiral Harrow said, holding up a document. "Issued this morning, authorizing a full inspection of this facility and seizure of any records related to patient care under Dr. Marcus Vell." His eyes were cold, lethal. "Now open the door, or I will." The guard looked at Caroline. She said nothing. Admiral Harrow nodded to one of the MPs. The officer stepped forward, pulled a tool from his belt, and popped the lock in under 10 seconds. The door swung open. The room was dark, stale, the air thick with disuse. And on the bed, barely visible in the dim light, was a man. Thin, pale, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Lena stepped inside, heart pounding. She moved to the bed, checked his pulse. Strong, steady. She leaned down, looked into his eyes. They tracked her, followed her movement. "Can you hear me?" she whispered. The man's mouth opened, a rasping breath. Then, barely audible, a single word. "Help." Lena's vision blurred. She turned to Dr. Moss. "He's awake." Dr. Moss was already moving, pulling equipment from her bag. She ran a pen light over his eyes, checked his reflexes. Locked in, just like Sophie. She looked at Admiral Harrow. He's been conscious this entire time. The Admiral's face was stone. He turned to Caroline, who stood frozen in the doorway. You knew, he said quietly. Caroline shook her head, frantic. This isn't. You knew, and you let him rot in here for 6 months. I was following orders, Caroline's voice cracked. Dr. Vell said the board decided we couldn't afford another lawsuit. So you buried him, Lena said, her voice shaking. You erased his name. You locked him away, and you let him die slowly because it was easier than admitting you were wrong. Caroline's face crumpled. I didn't know what else to do. Admiral Harrow stepped forward, and his voice dropped into a register that made the air itself feel heavy. You're under arrest, obstruction, negligence, conspiracy. And if this man doesn't survive, you'll be looking at manslaughter. The MPs moved in, hands on Caroline's arms. She didn't resist, just stood there, tears streaming, as they cuffed her and led her away. The hallway was silent except for the rasp of Daniel Frost's breathing and the quiet hum of machines being wheeled in by Dr. Moss's team. Lena stood beside the bed, looking down at the man who'd been forgotten, erased, left to die. And she felt something crack open inside her. Rage, grief, vindication, all tangled together. She'd found him. But how many others were there? How many rooms like this? How many people buried alive in the system, voiceless and invisible? Dr. Moss put a hand on her shoulder. You did it. Lena shook her head. Not yet. Because as the MPs led Caroline away, Lena saw something in her expression. Not just fear, not just guilt. Relief. Like she was finally free of a secret she'd been carrying. Like there was something worse still hidden. Something even she didn't want to protect anymore. And that's when Lena realized the truth. Caroline wasn't the one in charge. She was just the face. The buffer. Someone higher up had given the orders, someone who was still walking free. Lena pulled out her phone, dialed Dr. Moss's number, even though she was standing right there. Dr. Moss frowned, then pulled out her own phone. Lena typed a message. We're not done. Someone else is running this. Dr. Moss read it, looked up, and nodded once. Then her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. Lena's screen lit up at the same time. You should have walked away. Now it's too late. Lena stared at the message, then at Dr. Moss, whose face had gone pale. The hallway buzzed with activity, medical staff rushing into room 318, MPs securing the area, Caroline Reeves being escorted toward the elevator, but the threat on the screen cut through all of it like a blade. Dr. Moss grabbed Lena's arm, pulled her into an empty supply closet, and shut the door. The noise from the hallway muffled into a dull hum. Show me, Dr. Moss said. Lena held up her phone. Dr. Moss read the message, jaw tightening. Same number as before? Different, but same pattern. Dr. Moss pulled out her own phone, fingers flying across the screen. I'm forwarding this to the investigative team. They'll trace it. She looked up, eyes hard. But we need to assume whoever sent this is inside the building, right now. Lena's pulse quickened. You think they're watching us? I think they've been watching since the moment you walked back through those doors. Dr. Moss pocketed her phone. Caroline wasn't the top. She was middle management. Someone gave her orders. Someone with enough power to orchestrate a cover-up across multiple departments. Who? That's what we're about to find out. Dr. Moss opened the door, scanned the hallway. But first, we get Daniel Frost stabilized and out of here. If they're willing to threaten us, they're willing to tie up loose ends. Lena followed her back into room 318, where Dr. Moss's team had already intubated Daniel and started an IV. His eyes were still open, still tracking movement, but his breathing was shallow and labored. 6 months of immobility had wrecked his body. Muscle atrophy, bed sores, pneumonia setting in. He was alive, but barely. Dr. Moss barked orders. Get him prepped for transport. I want him at Walter Reed within 2 hours. Full neuro workup, respiratory support, and around-the-clock monitoring. One of the nurses hesitated. Ma'am, we'll need hospital authorization to transfer. You have it, Admiral Harrow said from the doorway. He held up the federal warrant. This facility is under investigation. Any patient care decisions go through me until further notice. The nurse nodded, visibly relieved, and got back to work. Lena stepped closer to the bed, looked down at Daniel. His eyes found hers, desperate and pleading. She leaned in, voice low. "We're getting you out. You're going to be okay." His lips moved barely. "Others." Lena's breath caught. "What?" "Others," he rasped again, the words scraping out like gravel. "More rooms." Dr. Moss was beside her in an instant. "How many?" Daniel's eyes fluttered, exhausted. "3, maybe 4. Lena's stomach dropped. She looked at Dr. Moss, whose expression had gone cold and lethal. "Find them," the Admiral said quietly. The hospital went into lockdown within the hour. Admiral Harrow didn't ask permission. He made a call, and 20 minutes later, federal marshals swarmed Ridgecrest Memorial. Every floor, every wing, every room with restricted access got opened, inventoried, searched. Lena stayed close to Dr. Moss, moving through the corridors like a shadow, watching as door after door swung open to reveal empty rooms, storage closets, abandoned equipment. But then they hit the 4th floor, the old surgical wing, closed for renovations 2 years ago and never reopened. 3 rooms, all locked, all marked with outdated biohazard signs that looked like they'd been slapped on as an afterthought. The marshals went in first. Lena heard the lock pop, heard the door creak open, heard someone swear softly. Then silence. Dr. Moss pushed past the marshal, Lena right behind her. The room was identical to Daniel's, dark, stale, a single bed in the center, and on that bed, another patient. A woman this time, mid-40s, thin to the point of skeletal, eyes open and staring. Dr. Moss checked her vitals, ran through the same tests she'd done with Daniel. Pupils reactive, pulse strong, reflexes present. "Locked in," Dr. Moss confirmed, voice tight. "She's awake." The woman's eyes filled with tears. Her mouth moved, forming words with no sound. "Doctor?" Moss leaned close, reading her lips. "Help me." Lena's vision blurred. She turned away, hands trembling, and saw the marshals opening the second door. Another patient. Male. Younger. Same condition. Third door. Another woman. Barely breathing. Infection ravaging her lungs, but alive. Conscious. Trapped. 4 people. 4 living, breathing, aware people locked away in forgotten rooms, erased from the system, left to die in silence. "Doctor." Moss stood in the center of the hallway, surrounded by the chaos, and her voice came out flat and cold. "Get them all out. Now. I want full medical teams, transport, and immediate transfers to Walter Reed. No delays, no bureaucracy. Move." The marshals scattered, radios crackling. Within minutes, the hallway was flooded with paramedics, stretchers, equipment. Lena helped where she could, checking IVs, stabilizing airways, murmuring reassurances to patients who hadn't heard a kind word in months. But her mind was elsewhere, racing through the implications. 4 patients, all misdiagnosed, all under Dr. Vell's care, all hidden away when their conditions didn't improve as expected. This wasn't malpractice. This was systematic elimination of evidence. Admiral Harrow found her in the stairwell an hour later, sitting on the steps, head in her hands. He sat down beside her, silent for a long moment. "You doing okay?" he asked. Lena laughed, the sound hollow. "No?" "Good. You shouldn't be." She looked at him. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes were human, tired, angry, grieving. 4 people, she said. 4 people who could have been saved months ago, if someone had just looked. But no one did, except you. I didn't look hard enough. I should have. You did what you could with what you knew, the Admiral interrupted. You can't carry the weight of every failure in this building. That's on them, not you. Lena's throat tightened. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Admiral Harrow stood, offered her a hand. She took it, let him pull her to her feet. Dr. Moss is coordinating with the federal team. They're pulling records, interviewing staff, tracking down everyone who had access to those rooms. Someone's going to break. And when they do, we'll know who gave the orders. And if they don't, then we keep digging until we hit bone on. The first break came at 3 a.m. A night shift janitor named Marcus Webb, 62, 20 years at Ridgecrest, came forward voluntarily. He sat in a conference room with two federal investigators, hands shaking, eyes red. Lena watched through the one-way glass as he talked. Dr. Moss stood beside her, arms crossed, face unreadable. "I knew something was wrong," Marcus said, voice cracking. "I cleaned those floors. I saw the locks. I asked about it once, and they told me it was quarantine. Infectious patients. Stay out." He wiped his eyes. "But I heard sounds, groaning, coughing, and I asked again. They told me if I didn't shut up, I'd lose my job." One of the investigators leaned forward. "Who told you that?" Marcus hesitated. "Dr. Raymond Cross, Chief of Staff. He said it was above my pay grade, said if I valued my pension, I'd forget what I heard." Dr. Moss's jaw tightened. "There it is?" Lena's stomach twisted. Dr. Cross. The same man who'd cornered her in the records room, who'd warned her to back off, who'd smiled and threatened her career with the casual ease of someone used to getting his way. "He's been here 30 years, Dr. Moss said quietly. "Built this place's reputation, brought in funding, expanded departments, made Ridgecrest a name people trusted." She looked at Lena. "And he's been covering up mistakes the entire time. How do we prove it?" "We already have." "Doctor." Moss pulled out her phone, showed Lena a message from the encryption team. "The threats you received? Trace back to a burner phone purchased with a hospital credit card. Guess whose name is on the account?" Lena's breath caught. "Cross." "He made a mistake, got sloppy, thought he could scare you off." Dr. Moss's smile was sharp and humorless. "He was wrong." They found Dr. Raymond Cross in his office at 4 a.m., sitting behind his desk, tie loosened, whiskey glass half empty. He looked up when the marshals entered, flanked by Admiral Harrow and Dr. Moss, and his expression didn't change. No fear, no surprise, just weary resignation. "I was wondering when you'd get here," he said. Admiral Harrow stepped forward, voice cold. "You're under arrest." Dr. Cross took a sip of his whiskey, set the glass down with deliberate care. "For what exactly?" "Obstruction of justice, conspiracy, negligent homicide, witness intimidation. Take your pick." Dr. Cross laughed, the sound bitter. "You think I'm the villain here? I kept this hospital afloat. I made the hard calls no one else wanted to make." "You locked people in rooms and left them to die," Lena said, stepping into the doorway. Her voice was steady, cold. "You erased their identities. You threatened anyone who asked questions. You're not a doctor. You're a coward." Dr. Cross's eyes flicked to her and something dark flickered across his face. "You don't understand how this works, Nurse Cross. Hospitals aren't charities. We can't save everyone. Sometimes we have to make choices." "Those weren't choices. They were murders. They were liabilities." Dr. Cross stood, voice rising. "Dr. Vell made mistakes. Big ones. Patients who should have been dead started showing signs of recovery. If that got out, we'd be buried in lawsuits. Families would sue. Insurance would drop us. We'd lose accreditation, funding, everything." He leaned forward, hands flat on the desk. "So yes, I made a call. I protected this institution, and I'd do it again." The room went silent. Admiral Harrow stepped closer, and his voice dropped into a tone that made the air feel heavy. "You just confessed, in front of federal officers, to multiple counts of criminal negligence and conspiracy to commit murder." Dr. Cross blinked, realization dawning. His face went pale. "I didn't. That's not—" "It is," Dr. Moss said. She held up her phone, screen showing a recording app. "Every word, time-stamped, admissible." Dr. Cross's legs gave out. He sank back into his chair, mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. The marshals moved in, cuffing him without resistance. He didn't fight, didn't argue, just sat there, staring at nothing, as they read him his rights and let him out. Lena watched him go, feeling nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a hollow ache where rage used to be. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. Dr. Moss shook her head. "Not yet. We still have to trace how deep this goes. How many staff knew? How many looked the other way? How many patients were affected?" She paused. "But the head's been cut off. The rest will follow." The next 72 hours were a blur. Arrests, resignations, press conferences. The story exploded across every major outlet: cable news, social media, print. Ridgecrest Memorial went from a respected institution to a national scandal overnight. Dr. Vell was arrested at his home, charged with medical fraud and negligent homicide. Caroline Reeves turned witness, cooperating with investigators in exchange for reduced charges. 3 board members resigned. 2 administrators were indicted. The hospital's accreditation was suspended pending a full federal audit. And through it all, Lena worked. She helped transfer the locked-in patients to Walter Reed, stayed with them during the initial evaluations, sat beside their beds when they woke up screaming from nightmares they couldn't escape, even when their eyes were open. Daniel Frost was the first to speak. 3 days after his transfer, his vocal cords damaged but functional, he told investigators everything. How he'd been hit by a car, how he'd woken up in the hospital, unable to move, unable to speak, listening to doctors declare him brain dead. How he'd heard Dr. Vell tell someone on the phone that the family wasn't pursuing charges, so the case could be managed quietly. Except Daniel didn't have family. He was a drifter, no permanent address, no next of kin, which made him perfect for disappearing. The other patients told similar stories. All of them had been isolated. All of them had been written off. All of them had been conscious the entire time, screaming silently into the void while the world moved on without them. And all of them survived because Lena Cross had refused to stay quiet. 2 weeks after the arrests, Admiral Harrow called Lena to Walter Reed. She found him in Sophie's room, where his daughter was sitting up in bed. Physical therapy bands wrapped around her arms, a tablet in her lap. She looked up when Lena entered, and her smile was bright and real. "Hey," Sophie said, her voice still soft but stronger than before. "Hey yourself," Lena said, stepping closer. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck, survived, and then got hit again." Sophie grinned. "But alive. So that's something." Lena laughed, the sound unexpected and genuine. "Yeah, that's definitely something." Admiral Harrow stood, gestured toward the hallway. "Can I borrow you for a minute?" Lena followed him out. They walked in silence until they reached a small conference room where Dr. Moss was waiting, along with a woman Lena didn't recognize. Mid-50s, sharp suit, FBI credentials clipped to her belt. "Nurse Cross, this is Special Agent Rachel Kahn," Dr. Moss said. "She's heading the federal investigation into Ridgecrest Memorial." Agent Kane extended a hand. Lena shook it, wary. "What's this about?" "We've been going through the records you copied," Agent Kane said, gesturing to a laptop on the table. "The timestamps, the altered charts, the falsified test results. It's damning, but there's a problem." Lena's stomach tightened. "What kind of problem?" "Dr. Cross is claiming he was following hospital policy, that the board knew about the locked rooms, that this was institutional, not individual." Agent Kane leaned forward. "If he's right, this doesn't end with him. It goes higher, and we need proof." "What kind of proof?" "The kind that shows a pattern of decision-making at the executive level. Board meeting minutes, internal memos, communications between Cross and the board." Agent Kane's eyes were sharp, calculating. "We have some of it, but not enough to guarantee convictions. If the board lawyers up and pleads ignorance, they could walk." Lena's hands curled into fists. "So what do you need from me?" "We need you to testify, publicly, at the federal hearing." Agent Kane's voice was steady, clinical. "You're the one who uncovered this. Your testimony carries weight, but it also paints a target on your back. Defense attorneys will come at you hard. They'll question your credentials, your motives, your methods. They'll try to discredit everything you did." Lena's jaw tightened. "Let them try." Agent Kane studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Hearing's in 3 weeks. We'll prep you, but you need to be ready. This won't be easy." "Nothing about this has been easy." Admiral Harrow spoke for the first time, voice quiet. "You don't have to do this. You've already done more than anyone had a right to ask." Lena looked at him, then at Dr. Moss, then at Agent Kane. "If I don't, they get away with it. And the next time a hospital decides a patient is too expensive or too complicated, they'll do the same thing." She straightened. "So yeah, I'll testify." Agent Kane's expression softened, just slightly. "Good. We'll be in touch." She left. Dr. Moss stayed behind, arms crossed. "You sure about this?" "No. Lena admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. Dr. Moss smiled, faint and approving. Good. Thought. The hearing was held in a federal courthouse in Washington, a marble monolith that smelled like old wood and power. Lena sat at the witness table, microphone in front of her, cameras lining the back of the room. The gallery was packed. Journalists, advocates, families of the victims, hospital staff who'd come to watch the institution they'd worked for get torn apart. The defense attorney was a man named Gerald Fisk, 60-something, expensive suit, a reputation for eviscerating witnesses. He stood, adjusted his glasses, and smiled at Lena like a shark sizing up prey. "Nurse Cross," he began, voice smooth and condescending. "You've painted quite a picture of negligence and conspiracy, but let's talk about your qualifications. You've been a registered nurse for how long?" 5 years. "And you've been at Ridgecrest Memorial for how long?" 3 months. Before I was suspended. 3 months, Fisk repeated, letting the words hang. "And in those 3 months, you determined that a neurologist with 20 years of experience was wrong about his diagnosis." "I determined that the diagnosis didn't match the patient's condition." "Based on what? Your extensive training in neurology?" "Based on observable signs that were being ignored." Fisk's smile widened. Observable signs, like a spike on a monitor, a reflex, things that could easily be explained as random neural activity. They weren't random. "But you're not qualified to make that determination, are you?" Lena's jaw tightened. "I'm qualified to recognize when a patient is responsive." "Are you? Or did you simply see what you wanted to see?" Fisk leaned on the table, voice dropping. "Isn't it true that you have a history of questioning authority? That you were discharged from the Army under less than ideal circumstances?" Agent Kane shot to her feet. "Objection. Relevance." The judge waved a hand. "Mr. Fisk, get to the point." Fisk straightened. "My point is that Nurse Cross has a pattern of insubordination, of believing she knows better than her superiors. And in this case, she inserted herself into a family's medical decision, bypassed protocol, and caused a media firestorm. Not because she was right, but because she was stubborn." Lena's hands trembled under the table, but her voice stayed steady. "I didn't bypass protocol. I asked for a second opinion, which is well within my scope of practice. And then you brought in a military neurologist without hospital authorization." "Admiral Harrow brought in the neurologist. I flagged the concern. He acted on it." Fisk's expression soured. He shuffled papers, regrouped. "Let's talk about the locked rooms. You claim my clients, hospital executives, knowingly imprisoned patients. But isn't it possible they simply didn't know? That Dr. Cross was acting independently?" Dr. Cross testified that the board knew. "Dr. Cross is facing criminal charges. He's trying to save himself by implicating others. Or he's telling the truth." Fisk's eyes narrowed. "You want to believe in a conspiracy, Nurse Cross, because it makes you the hero. But the truth is simpler. Dr. Vell made mistakes. Dr. Cross covered for him out of misguided loyalty. The board was kept in the dark. And you stumbled into the middle of it, desperate for validation." Lena's pulse hammered, but she leaned forward, met his gaze, and spoke slowly. "I didn't stumble into anything. I saw a woman being sentenced to death because no one bothered to check if she was actually dying. I saw 4 other people locked in rooms because it was easier than admitting a mistake. And I saw executives threaten me, manipulate records, and try to bury the truth." She paused. "So no, Mr. Fisk. This isn't about validation. This is about 5 people who are alive because someone finally paid attention." The gallery erupted, murmurs, applause, a few shouts. The judge banged his gavel. "Order!" Fisk's face flushed. He glanced at his notes, then back at Lena. No further questions. Lena was dismissed. She walked out of the courtroom, legs shaking, and found Dr. Moss and Admiral Harrow waiting in the hallway. "You did good," Dr. Moss said. Lena shook her head. "I don't know if it was enough." "It was," Admiral Harrow said quietly. "Trust me." The verdict came down 3 days later. The board was found liable for gross negligence and institutional misconduct. Fines in the tens of millions. Criminal charges for 2 executives. Ridgecrest Memorial's license was revoked. The hospital would be shut down, restructured, and reopened under federal oversight. Dr. Raymond Cross was sentenced to 15 years. Dr. Marcus Vell got 20. Caroline Reeves received 5 years probation and permanent revocation of her administrative credentials. And the 5 patients, Sophie Harrow, Daniel Frost, and the 3 others, were alive, recovering, fighting their way back. Lena watched the news coverage from her apartment, exhausted and numb. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Moss. "Job offer still stands. Think about it." She stared at the message for a long time. Then she set the phone down, walked to the window, and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, another hospital was making the same mistakes. Another patient was being written off. Another voice was being silenced. But this time, someone would be listening. Because Lena Cross had learned something in the last month. She'd learned that the system didn't protect people. People protected people. And if no one else was willing to do it, then she would. Her phone buzzed again. Different number. Unknown. She opened the message. "You think you won, but you just opened a door you can't close. They're coming for you. And this time, there's nowhere to hide." Lena stared at the screen, heart pounding. Then she forwarded it to Agent Kane, to Dr. Moss, to Admiral Harrow, and she typed a reply. "Let them come." She hit send, set the phone down, and smiled. Because whoever they were, they'd just made the same mistake Dr. Cross had. They'd underestimated her. The reply sat on her screen for exactly 40 seconds before her phone rang. Agent Kane's name flashed across the display. Lena picked up. "I figured you'd call." "What the hell are you doing?" Agent Kane's voice was sharp, urgent. "You don't engage with anonymous threats. You report them and let us handle it." "I did report it. I forwarded it to you." "And then you replied. You just told whoever's out there that you're not backing down." "Good, because I'm not." Agent Kane was silent for a beat. "You realize what you just did? You made yourself a target." "I've been a target since the moment I flagged Sophie Harrow's case." Lena's voice was steady, cold. "The only difference now is I'm not pretending otherwise." "Lena, they want me scared. They want me to walk away. I'm done giving people what they want." She paused. "Trace the number. Find out who sent it. And when you do, I want to be there when you bring them in." Agent Kane exhaled, frustrated. "You're not an agent. You can't." "Then deputize me. Consultant. Witness protection. I don't care what you call it. But I'm not sitting on the sidelines while someone tries to clean up loose ends." Another pause. Then Agent Kane's tone shifted, reluctant but resigned. "I'll see what I can do. But you stay put. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't talk to anyone you don't trust. And for the love of everything, don't reply to any more threats." "Understood." The line went dead. Lena set the phone down, stared at it for a long moment, then grabbed her jacket and keys. She wasn't staying put. Not when someone out there thought they could silence her with a text message. She had one stop to make first. Walter Reed was quieter at night, the hallways dim and nearly empty except for the occasional nurse making rounds. Lena signed in at the security desk, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and walked to Sophie's room. The door was open. Sophie was awake, sitting up in bed, a book in her lap. She looked up when Lena entered, and her expression brightened. "You're here late," Sophie said. "Couldn't sleep." Lena pulled up a chair, sat down. "How are you feeling?" "Better? Still weak? Still sounds like I'm talking through gravel." Sophie's smile was faint but real. "But alive, which is more than I had a month ago." Lena nodded. "I need to ask you something." Sophie set the book aside. "Okay." "When you were locked in, when you couldn't move, couldn't speak, did you ever hear anyone mention why? Why they were keeping you there instead of transferring you or calling in specialists?" Sophie's face clouded. "Yeah, once. 2 people were in my room. I couldn't see them, but I recognized the voices. Dr. Cross and someone else. A woman. They were arguing." Lena leaned forward. "About what?" "About me. The woman said they needed to move me, that keeping me there was too risky. Dr. Cross said no. Said if they moved me, someone might reevaluate the diagnosis. And if that happened, the lawsuits would bury the hospital." Sophie's voice cracked. "He said it was better to let me run out the clock." Lena's hands curled into fists. Do you remember the woman's voice? Not her name, but she sounded older, authoritative, like she was used to giving orders. Lena pulled out her phone, scrolled through the hospital board directory, and found a photo. Was it her? Sophie looked at the screen. Her face went pale. Yeah, that's her. The photo showed Dr. Patricia Langford, hospital board chair, 58, 30 years in healthcare administration. She'd resigned 2 days after the federal investigation started, citing health reasons. But she hadn't been charged, hadn't been questioned, hadn't even been mentioned in the hearings. Lena's pulse quickened. Are you sure? Positive. I'd know that voice anywhere. Sophie's hands trembled. She was in my room at least 3 times, always with Dr. Cross, always talking about managing the situation. Lena stood. I need to go. Wait, what are you going to do? What I should have done weeks ago. Lena headed for the door, then stopped, looked back. Thank you, Sophie. For what? For fighting, for holding on, for not giving up even when everyone else did. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. You didn't give up either. Lena nodded once, then left. She called Agent Kane from the parking lot, relayed everything Sophie had told her. Agent Kane listened in silence, then swore softly. Langford resigned before we could interview her, said she was dealing with a family emergency and moved out of state. Where? We don't know. She didn't leave a forwarding address. Lena's jaw tightened. So she ran. Or she's being protected. Agent Kane's voice was grim. If she was the one giving Cross his orders, she's got connections, money, resources. She's not going to make this easy. Then we make it hard. Lena started the car. I'm coming to your office. We need to find her. Lena, this isn't... I'm already on my way. She hung up before Agent Kane could argue. The FBI field office was a concrete fortress in downtown Washington, all glass and steel and security checkpoints. Agent Kane met her in the lobby, arms crossed, expression somewhere between exasperated and impressed. You don't follow instructions, do you? Not when they don't make sense. Lena followed her through security into an elevator and up to a floor filled with cubicles and conference rooms. Agent Kane led her to a small office cluttered with files, laptops, and empty coffee cups. Sit, Agent Kane said, gesturing to a chair. She pulled up a screen, started typing. Langford's last known address was a condo in Georgetown. Sold 3 weeks ago. Bank accounts closed. Credit cards canceled. She wiped herself clean. What about family, friends, professional contacts? We're running those down, but it's going to take time. Lena shook her head. We don't have time. If she sent that threat, she's planning something. And if she's planning something, it means she thinks she can still win. Agent Kane looked at her, eyes sharp. What are you thinking? I'm thinking someone like Langford doesn't just disappear. She's too careful, too methodical. She's got a plan. And part of that plan involves making sure no one can tie her to what happened at Ridgecrest. Which means what? Which means she's going to come after the witnesses, starting with the ones who can put her in the room. Lena's stomach twisted. Sophie, Daniel, the others. Agent Kane's face went still. She grabbed her phone, dialed. Get me security at Walter Reed. Now what? The call came through 2 minutes later. Walter Reed's head of security confirmed that all 5 patients were under protective watch. MPs stationed outside their rooms, restricted visitor access, full surveillance. No one had attempted entry, no suspicious activity. Agent Kane hung up, exhaled. They're safe. For now. For now isn't good enough. It's all we've got until we find Langford. Agent Kane leaned back, rubbed her eyes. We've got alerts on her passport, her driver's license, her professional credentials. If she tries to leave the country or access any of her old accounts, we'll know. And if she doesn't? Agent Kane didn't answer. She didn't have to. They both knew the truth. Langford was smart. She'd covered her tracks. And unless she made a mistake, she'd stay hidden. Lena stood. Then we force her hand. Agent Kane frowned. How? We make noise, loud, public noise. We go to the press. We tell them the board chair knew, that she ordered the cover-up, that she's running because she's guilty. Lena's voice was hard, certain. She's hiding because she thinks she can wait this out. We make her realize she can't. Agent Kane stared at her for a long moment. Then she smiled, faint and approving. You're not wrong. But if we do this, there's no walking it back. She'll come at you hard. Lawyers, defamation suits, worse. Let her. Lena met her gaze. I'm done hiding. The press conference was scheduled for the next morning. Lena stood beside Agent Kane and Admiral Harrow on the steps of the federal courthouse, cameras and microphones crowding the platform. Dr. Moss was there too, along with two of the recovered patients, Daniel Frost and a woman named Maria Valdez, both still weak but determined. Admiral Harrow spoke first, his voice steady and commanding. 3 weeks ago, my daughter was declared brain dead by a hospital I trusted. I was told to let her go, to accept that she was gone. He paused. But she wasn't gone. She was trapped, conscious, aware, listening to everything. And if not for one nurse who refused to stay silent, she would have died. The cameras clicked, flashes popping. Admiral Harrow stepped aside. Agent Kane took the microphone. The federal investigation into Ridgecrest Memorial has uncovered a pattern of negligence, fraud, and institutional misconduct, but it has also uncovered something worse. Evidence suggests that senior hospital leadership, including board chair Dr. Patricia Langford, knowingly authorized the concealment of misdiagnosed patients to avoid legal liability. Agent Kane's voice was cold, clinical. Dr. Langford has not cooperated with this investigation. She has fled, and we are issuing a federal warrant for her arrest. The crowd erupted. Questions shouted, voices overlapping. Agent Kane ignored them, turned to Lena. Nurse Cross has agreed to make a statement. Lena stepped forward. The noise settled into tense silence. She gripped the edges of the podium, looked out at the sea of faces and cameras, and spoke. I'm not a hero. I'm a nurse. I did what I was trained to do. I paid attention. I asked questions. And when I didn't get answers, I kept asking. Her voice was steady, clear. But I shouldn't have had to fight this hard. Sophie Harrow shouldn't have spent 6 months locked inside her own body. Daniel Frost shouldn't have been erased from existence. Maria Valdez shouldn't have been left to die in a forgotten room. She paused. They survived because someone finally listened, but 3 others didn't. And that's on the people who chose silence over accountability. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. Dr. Patricia Langford was the chair of Ridgecrest Memorial's board. She knew what was happening. She ordered it, and now she's running because she knows she's guilty. Lena's gaze hardened. But there's nowhere left to hide. The truth is out. The victims are alive, and justice is coming. She stepped back. The crowd exploded, questions, shouts, chaos. But Lena didn't hear any of it. She just walked off the platform, past the cameras, and into the building. Admiral Harrow caught up with her in the hallway. That was good. It was necessary. It was both. He paused. You know she's going to respond. I'm counting on it. The response came faster than anyone expected. 6 hours after the press conference, a statement was released by Langford's attorney, a slick, carefully worded denial that accused the federal investigators of conducting a witch hunt and Lena of seeking fame at the expense of a respected professional's reputation. The media ate it up. Cable news split into camps, some defending Langford, others condemning her. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended. The story went viral. But buried in the noise was something Agent Kane's team caught. The statement had been filed from a law office in Baltimore, and the metadata on the document showed it had been created on a computer registered to a shell corporation tied to one of Langford's old real estate holdings. They had her location. Agent Kane assembled a team within the hour. Federal marshals, local police, surveillance units. They moved on the address at dawn, a luxury townhouse in Baltimore's Harbor East District, all glass and exposed brick and waterfront views that cost more than most people made in a decade. Lena rode in the back of Agent Kane's SUV, watching through the window as the sun came up over the harbor. She'd insisted on being there, and Agent Kane had reluctantly agreed as long as she stayed in the vehicle and out of the line of fire. The marshals surrounded the building, cut off every exit, and knocked on the front door. Once. Twice. No answer. Then they breached. Lena watched on the monitor as the team swept through the townhouse, room by room, weapons drawn, living room clear, Kitchen clear. Office. They found her there. Dr. Patricia Langford sat at a mahogany desk, laptop open, files spread across the surface. She looked up when the marshals entered, and her face registered no surprise, just cold, calculated acceptance. Dr. Patricia Langford, the lead marshal said, "You're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and criminal negligence resulting in death." She stood slowly, hands raised. "I'd like to call my attorney." "You'll get your call after you're processed." They cuffed her, read her rights, and let her out. Lena watched through the SUV's tinted window as Langford was escorted down the front steps, past the growing crowd of reporters, and into the back of a marshal's vehicle. For just a moment, Langford's eyes swept the street, cold, assessing, still looking for angles even now. Then the door slammed shut, and she was gone. Agent Kane climbed back into the SUV, exhaled. "We got her." Lena nodded, but the weight in her chest didn't lift. "What was she doing when you found her?" "Destroying evidence, deleting files. She had a shredder running, papers everywhere." Agent Kane's jaw tightened. "But we stopped her in time. The forensics team is pulling everything off her hard drive now." "Will it be enough?" "More than enough. She kept records of everything, emails with Cross, meeting notes, financial transactions." Agent Kane's smile was grim. She thought she was covering her tracks, but she was building our case for us. The evidence was damning. Emails proving Langford had personally authorized the concealment of misdiagnosed patients. Meeting minutes showing she'd pressured Dr. Cross to avoid transfers and second opinions. Financial records linking hospital funds to legal teams tasked with silencing potential whistleblowers. And a journal. Handwritten. Detailed. In it, Langford had documented every decision, every calculation, every risk assessment. She'd treated the cover-up like a business problem. Cost-benefit analysis, risk mitigation, damage control. 3 deaths were listed under acceptable losses. 5 survivors were categorized as ongoing liabilities. When the journal's contents leaked to the press, the public outcry was deafening. Protests outside the courthouse, calls for systemic reform. Families of other patients coming forward with their own stories of medical negligence and institutional indifference. Lena watched it unfold from a distance, feeling numb. She'd wanted justice. She'd gotten it. But the scale of what had been hidden, not just at Ridgecrest but across the industry, was overwhelming. Dr. Moss found her sitting alone in a hospital cafeteria, staring at a cup of cold coffee. "You okay?" Dr. Moss asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "I don't know." Lena's voice was flat. "We found them. We stopped them. But how many others are out there? How many hospitals have rooms like that? How many patients are being written off because it's easier than admitting a mistake?" Dr. Moss was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "A lot. Probably more than we'll ever know." "That's not comforting." "It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be a reality check." Dr. Moss leaned forward. "You can't save everyone, Lena. You can't fix the whole system, but you can change it, one case at a time, one hospital at a time. And that's what you're doing." Lena looked at her. "Is it enough?" "It's more than most people ever do." Dr. Moss stood. "Come on. There's someone who wants to see you." Sophie Harrow was in the physical therapy room, walking between parallel bars with a therapist on each side. Her steps were slow, deliberate, shaky, but they were steps. Real ones, under her own power. She looked up when Lena entered, and her face lit up. "Watch this." She let go of the bars, took one step, then another, then 3 more before her legs gave out and the therapist caught her. 5 steps, Sophie said, breathless and grinning. "Last week it was 2. Lena's throat tightened. "That's amazing. I'm getting there, slowly, but I'm getting there." Sophie sat down on a bench, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I heard they arrested Langford. This morning." "Good." Sophie's expression hardened. "I hope she rots." Lena sat beside her. "The trial's going to be ugly. They're going to make you testify. All of you. I know. And I will." Sophie looked at her. "Because if I don't, someone else ends up in that room. And I can't live with that." Lena nodded. She understood. That was the weight they all carried now, the survivors, the witnesses, the ones who'd made it out. The knowledge that their voices were the only thing standing between the truth and another cover-up. "I'm going back to med school," Sophie said after a moment. "Once I can walk without falling on my face." Lena blinked. "Really?" "Yeah, I figure if I survived being buried alive in my own body for 6 months, I can survive organic chemistry." Sophie's smile was wry, self-deprecating. "And maybe I can do some good. Make sure the next generation of doctors doesn't pull the same crap." "You'll be great." "Maybe. Or maybe I'll crash and burn, but at least I'll try." Sophie paused. "What about you? What's next?" Lena exhaled slowly. "I don't know. Agent Kane wants me to consult on other cases. Dr. Moss wants me to help set up a patient advocacy program. Admiral Harrow wants me to testify at congressional hearings." She laughed, the sound bitter. "Everyone wants a piece of me, but I don't know what I want." "Yes, you do," Sophie said quietly. "You want to make sure this never happens again. That's why you're still here. That's why you haven't walked away." Lena looked at her, and something in her chest cracked open. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for that." "You are. You already proved it." Sophie reached over, squeezed her hand. "You saved my life. You saved Daniel's, Maria's, the others. And you didn't do it because you're superhuman. You did it because you cared enough to look when everyone else looked away." Lena's vision blurred. She blinked hard, nodded. Sophie stood, wobbled slightly, then steadied herself. "Come on, let's get out of here. I'm buying you dinner. Well, my dad's buying, but same difference." The trial began 3 months later. The courtroom was packed every day. Families, reporters, medical professionals, activists. Langford sat at the defense table, expression blank, while her attorneys argued that she'd been acting in the hospital's best interest, that she'd made difficult decisions under impossible circumstances, that she was being scapegoated for systemic failures. The prosecution tore that argument apart. They presented the emails, the meeting minutes, the journal, and they called witnesses. Daniel Frost testified about waking up in room 318, unable to move, listening to doctors declare him brain dead while he screamed silently inside his own mind. Maria Valdez testified about 6 months of darkness, isolation, pain, and the certainty that she'd been forgotten. Sophie Harrow testified about hearing her father's voice break as he was told to let her go, about feeling the warmth of his hand even as she couldn't squeeze back, about the terror of knowing she was alive but being unable to prove it. And Lena testified. For 8 hours across 2 days, she walked the jury through every observation, every decision, every moment that led to the discovery. She explained the medical signs of locked-in syndrome. She detailed the cover-up. She read excerpts from Langford's journal aloud, her voice steady and cold. The defense attorney tried to rattle her. "Isn't it true, Nurse Cross, that you had a personal vendetta against Dr. Vell? That you saw this as an opportunity to discredit him?" "No." "Isn't it true that you violated hospital protocol by accessing restricted files?" "I accessed files I was authorized to view as part of patient care." "Isn't it true that you've profited from this case? Book deals, speaking engagements, media appearances?" Lena's jaw tightened. "I haven't accepted a single dollar. Every speaking fee I've been offered went to a patient advocacy fund. Every interview I've done was to make sure this story didn't get buried." The attorney's face flushed. No further questions. When the verdict came down, it was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Langford was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. No parole, no early release. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read. Langford sat rigid, face blank, staring straight ahead. Then the marshals led her away, and she was gone. Lena walked out of the courthouse into a wall of cameras and questions. She didn't stop, just kept walking until she reached the street where Admiral Harrow and Dr. Moss were waiting. "It's done," the Admiral said. Lena nodded. "Yeah, it is." Dr. Moss smiled. "So what now?" Lena looked at her, then at the Admiral, then at the courthouse behind them. "Now we make sure it never happens again." 3 months later, Lena stood in a new office. Small, clean, filled with filing cabinets and computers. The door read Patient Advocacy Initiative in simple black letters. Dr. Moss had helped set it up, using grant money and donations from families who'd been affected by the Ridgecrest scandal. The mission was straightforward: investigate medical negligence cases, advocate for patients who couldn't advocate for themselves, and hold institutions accountable when they failed. Lena wasn't the director. She'd insisted on bringing in someone with administrative experience for that, but she was the lead investigator, the one who went into hospitals, talked to families, reviewed charts, and asked the questions no one else wanted to ask. It was exhausting, frustrating, often heartbreaking. But it was right. She was at her desk, reviewing a case file, when her phone buzzed. A text from Sophie Harrow. "Physical therapy kicked my ass today, but I walked 30 steps without support." 30? Thought you'd want to know. Lena smiled, typed back. "That's amazing. Keep going." Another buzz, this time from Daniel Frost. "Started a new job, warehouse manager, nothing fancy, but it's mine, and I actually get to use my brain again. Thanks for giving me the chance." Lena's throat tightened. She replied with a simple thumbs up, then set the phone down. A knock at the door. She looked up. Admiral Harrow stood in the doorway, holding 2 coffee cups and a folder. "Thought you could use this," he said, handing her one. "Thanks." Lena took a sip, savoring the warmth. "What's in the folder?" Congressional Bill, Patient Protection Act, mandatory second opinions for brain death diagnoses, federal oversight for locked-in syndrome cases, whistleblower protections for healthcare workers. He set it on her desk. "They're calling it the Harrow Cross Act, named after Sophie and you." Lena's breath caught. She opened the folder, scanned the first page. This is real? Passed the House last week. Senate vote next month. It's going to become law." He smiled faintly. "You changed the system, Lena. Actually changed it." She couldn't speak, just stared at the document, hands trembling. Admiral Harrow sat down across from her. "Sophie's doing well, by the way. Doctors say she'll make a full recovery. She's already been accepted back into med school. Starts in the fall." "That's incredible." "She wants to specialize in neurology. Says if she's going to survive something like that, she's going to make sure no one else goes through it." He paused. "Sounds like someone else I know." Lena huffed a quiet laugh. "She's stronger than I am." "No, you're both strong, just in different ways." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Admiral Harrow said, "You know, when this started, I thought I'd lost everything. My daughter was gone. The hospital had given up. I was ready to sign the papers and let her go." His voice roughened. "But you didn't let me. You saw what no one else saw, and because of that, I still have my daughter." Lena's eyes burned. "I just did what needed to be done. Most people don't. They see something wrong and they walk past it. You didn't." He stood. "That matters. More than you know." He left a few minutes later, and Lena sat alone in the quiet office, staring at the congressional bill. A law. An actual law that would protect patients and empower healthcare workers to speak up without fear of retaliation. It was more than she'd ever imagined, but it still wasn't enough, because her phone was already buzzing with new cases. A teenager in Nevada diagnosed as vegetative, a young mother in Ohio whose family was being pressured to withdraw care, an elderly man in Florida who'd been written off as brain dead but whose daughter swore she'd seen him respond. 23 cases in the last month alone. And those were just the ones people had reported. Lena picked up the phone, opened the first case file, and started reading. 6 months later, Lena stood on a stage in a conference hall in Chicago, facing an audience of 2,000 healthcare professionals. Doctors, nurses, administrators, students, people who'd come to hear her speak about patient advocacy and institutional accountability. She'd given this talk dozens of times now, in dozens of cities. But it never got easier. Every time she saw the same reactions in the crowd, some skeptical, some defensive, some genuinely curious, and every time she wondered if her words would actually change anything. But then she'd get an email, a message, a call from someone who'd heard her speak and decided to ask the hard questions at their own hospital, who'd flagged a case that didn't sit right, who'd refused to stay silent, and she'd know it was worth it. She finished her talk to a standing ovation, fielded questions for 40 minutes, then walked off stage. Dr. Moss was waiting in the wings, grinning. "You're getting good at this." "I'm getting tired of needing to do it," Lena said, but she smiled. Dr. Moss handed her a tablet. "New case just came in. 17-year-old in Nevada. Diagnosed as vegetative after a skiing accident. Family's getting pressure to disconnect. Sound familiar? Lena took the tablet, scanned the details. Her jaw tightened. Yeah, it does. You want me to handle it? Lena shook her head. No, I'll go. You sure? You've been on the road for a month straight. I'm sure. Lena looked at Dr. Moss. Because if I don't, who will? Dr. Moss smiled. That's what I thought you'd say. Us. Lena flew to Nevada the next day. She walked into Carson Valley Medical Center, a small community hospital outside Reno, and met with the family. The mother was exhausted, eyes red from crying. The father was angry, helpless, pacing the waiting room like a caged animal. Their son was 17, a straight-A student, a ski racer with college scholarships waiting. And now he was lying in a bed, unresponsive, while doctors told them there was no hope. Lena spent 3 hours reviewing his chart, talking to the attending physicians, examining the scans. Then she went into his room, alone, and did the same test she'd done with Sophie. Pressure points, reflex checks, observation. And there it was, a flicker on the monitor, a subtle change in muscle tone, a response that didn't fit the diagnosis. She called in a specialist from Reno, ran new scans with higher resolution, ordered a different protocol, and 3 days later, they had their answer. The boy wasn't brain dead. He wasn't even vegetative. He had a rare form of brainstem compression that mimicked locked-in syndrome. Consciousness intact, motor function severely impaired. Treatable, reversible, if caught in time. Surgery was scheduled within the week. Lena stayed through the procedure, sat with the family in the waiting room, held the mother's hand when the surgeon came out and said the words they'd been praying to hear. We got it. The compression's relieved. He's stable. The mother collapsed, sobbing. The father stood frozen, unable to process it. Lena stayed with them until they were allowed into recovery, until they saw their son's eyes open, until he squeezed his mother's hand and whispered his first word in 3 weeks. Mom. Lena left the hospital that night, walked to her rental car, and sat in the driver's seat with her hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. She'd done it again. Saved another life. Stopped another mistake before it became a tragedy. But the weight didn't lift, because she knew there were more, hundreds more, maybe thousands. Patients misdiagnosed, families pressured, voices silenced, and she couldn't save them all. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Thank you for what you do. My brother was in a coma last year. Doctors said he was gone. But a nurse like you, she didn't give up. He's alive today because of her. Because of people like you, don't stop. Lena read it twice, then set the phone down. She started the car, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove through the dark Nevada night toward the airport. She wouldn't stop. She couldn't. Because somewhere, in a hospital room she'd never seen, a patient was lying in silence, waiting for someone to notice, to care, to fight. And Lena Cross would be that someone, for as long as it took. 2 years after Sophie Harrow opened her eyes for the first time, Lena received an invitation. A ceremony at Walter Reed. A dedication. She arrived to find a crowd gathered in the hospital's main lobby. Admiral Harrow was there, older now, but still sharp. Dr. Moss. Sophie, walking without assistance, wearing a white coat with her name embroidered on the chest. Dr. Sophie Harrow, first-year resident. And in the center of the lobby, a bronze plaque mounted on the wall. In honor of those who refused to stay silent, in memory of those who were silenced, in gratitude to those who listen. Below it, 5 names. The patients from Ridgecrest, the ones who'd survived. Sophie stepped forward, wiping her eyes. We wanted to do something, to make sure people remember. Not just what happened, but why it mattered. She looked at Lena. Because of you, we're still here, and because of you, others will be too. Lena's throat tightened. She couldn't speak, so she just nodded. Admiral Harrow put a hand on her shoulder. You taught us something, Nurse Cross. You taught us that the smallest voice can change everything, as long as it refuses to be quiet. Daniel Frost stepped forward, still thin but stronger now, working as a warehouse manager and going to night school. You gave me my life back, all of us. We owe you everything. Maria Valdez was there too, wheelchair-bound but smiling, her daughter beside her. I heard you in that room. When you came in, when you checked on me. I heard you say, "You're not alone," and I held on because of that. Lena looked at them, these people who'd been erased, forgotten, written off. And now they were standing, speaking, living, because someone had listened. Admiral Harrow handed her a small box. "We wanted to give you something. It's not much, but it's from all of us." Lena opened it. Inside was a silver pendant, a simple microphone etched into the metal. On the back, an inscription, for the voice that wouldn't be silenced. Her vision blurred. She tried to speak, couldn't. Just pressed the pendant to her chest and let the tears come. Sophie hugged her, then Daniel, then Maria. Then others she didn't even know, families of patients she'd helped, nurses who'd heard her speak, students who wanted to follow her example. And through it all, Admiral Harrow stood beside her, steady and quiet, until the crowd dispersed and it was just the two of them in the empty lobby. "You did good," he said quietly. "We're not done yet." "No, but we're closer than we were." He looked at the plaque. 3 years ago, my daughter was dying, and I didn't even know it. Today, she's saving lives. That's because of you." Lena shook her head. "It's because of her. She's the one who fought." "You both did." He turned to face her. "And you're going to keep fighting. I know you. You won't stop until every hospital, every doctor, every administrator knows that patients aren't liabilities. They're people, and people deserve to be heard." Lena met his gaze. "That's the plan." He smiled. "Good." 5 years after Sophie Harrow woke up, the Patient Protection Act, officially named the Harrow Cross Act, became federal law. Mandatory second opinions for brain death diagnoses. Federal oversight for locked-in syndrome cases. Whistleblower protections for healthcare workers who reported negligence. Lena was invited to the signing ceremony at the White House. She stood in the East Room, surrounded by politicians and activists and families, and watched as the president signed the bill into law. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't solve everything, but it was a start. Sophie was there too, now a third-year resident specializing in neurology. She stood beside Lena, watching the ceremony, and whispered, "We did it." "You did it," Lena corrected. "We did it," Sophie repeated firmly. "Together." After the ceremony, Lena walked out onto the White House lawn, phone buzzing with congratulatory messages. She ignored them all, sat on a bench under a tree, and just breathed. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then she did. "Lena Cross." "Ms. Cross, my name is Janet Reyes. I'm calling from Phoenix. My husband, the doctors say he's brain dead, but I don't think he is. I've been reading about your work, and Her voice broke. "I don't know what to do." Lena closed her eyes, exhaled slowly. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." She listened, took notes, asked questions, and by the time the call ended, she'd already booked a flight to Phoenix and contacted a neurologist she trusted. Because this was the work. This was the fight. Not the ceremonies or the laws or the recognition. It was the voice on the other end of the phone, desperate and terrified, needing someone to believe them. And Lena Cross would always answer that call. 10 years after Sophie Harrow opened her eyes, Lena stood in a packed auditorium at Johns Hopkins, addressing the graduating class of nursing students. She was older now, grayer, the lines on her face deeper. But her voice was still strong. "You're about to enter a system that's broken in a lot of ways," she said. "You're going to see things that don't make sense. Protocols that prioritize paperwork over patients. Hierarchies that punish questions. Institutions that protect themselves instead of the people they're supposed to serve." The students were silent, listening. "And you're going to have a choice. You can stay silent, do your job, keep your head down, or you can speak up. Ask the hard questions. Challenge the system when it's wrong." She paused. "I won't lie to you. Speaking up is hard. It's exhausting. It's lonely. You'll be dismissed, doubted, sometimes threatened, but it's also the most important thing you'll ever do. Because your voice, your refusal to stay silent, could be the difference between life and death for someone who has no voice of their own." She stepped back from the podium. The auditorium erupted into applause. After the ceremony, students lined up to talk to her, to shake her hand, to tell her they'd been inspired by her story. Lena listened to each one, answered their questions, offered what encouragement she could. And when the last student left, she walked out into the Baltimore evening, past the statues and the fountains, and sat on a bench overlooking the harbor. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Just finished a 12-hour shift, saved 2 lives, lost 1. But the 2 I saved? They're alive because I asked the questions you taught me to ask. Thank you for everything. Lena smiled, tears pricking her eyes. She typed back, "You don't need to thank me, you're doing the work. That's all that matters." She pocketed her phone, stood, and started walking. Not toward her car, not toward home, just walking, thinking about the patients she'd helped, the lives she'd saved, the system she'd changed, however slightly. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. There would always be another case, another hospital, another voice that needed to be heard. But it was something, and something was better than nothing. Lena Cross had learned that truth the hard way, and she'd spend the rest of her life making sure others learned it too. Because in the end, the fight wasn't about winning. It was about refusing to surrender, about standing up when everyone else sat down, about listening when everyone else looked away. And as long as there were patients who needed someone to hear them, Lena would be there, listening, fighting, refusing to be silent. That was her promise, and she'd never break it.